Okay, hey guys, thanks for coming to my talk. It will just be like walking through you what a day in the life of a threat hunter looks like. But before I begin, I guess I have to introduce myself. I'm actually a threat hunter at WithSecure, and I've been with the company for more than 3 years. I'm also a casual conference volunteer, so mainly only when people like Emil beckons. And my last stint was actually at Hack in the Box Singapore back in August. So when I was actually Googling around to see like what other people's like, who am I looks like, right? I noticed that some people, they like to include this thing called the 3 years to make it seem like they actually have a life beyond their tech jobs. So these are mine. I'm a coffee chugger and a whiskey sipper as well as a crazy cat owner. Yeah, and whether like the crazy is the word used to describe me or my cat, I leave it up to your imagination. And yeah, there's a photo of my very adorable cat. So, what do I actually do? The thing about being a threat hunter is whenever you actually kind of like try to introduce yourself to people, especially those people who are not in the cybersecurity space, right, they usually give you like this look with the question mark. Like, okay, a threat hunter, so you hunt for things. Do you like carry around a rifle and, I don't know, shoot birds out of the sky or something? Yeah, so very awkward for me to actually like explain exactly what I do. But then I try my best to summarize it into these 4 points today. So I find threats, and that's basically malicious activity that we don't already detect with our existing security mechanisms. And then this can be in the form of maybe a new kind of exploit for a recently published vulnerability, or it can be a known exploit that actually somehow slips through our detection because they are like kind of blending in with legitimate events that generates lots of noise. And I write rules to automate the detection of specific attacker behaviors, or TTPs, if you will. Of course, the idea for detection rules, they don't just fall from the sky. So usually that's the result of a successful threat hunt. So take for example, today I want to do an attack-based hunting. Maybe I'll just go read up on a recently published vulnerability, and then I will try to see if I can find anything that will allow me to simulate the attack. Maybe there's a already an available POC exploit lying around somewhere that I can just use. So with that, if I get the stuff that will allow me to generate this attack, then I'll be able to look at all my telemetry that I've collected. And then from there, I try to identify like what's anomalous, what's normal, and then what kind of pattern can I associate with this specific exploit. And actually a large part of my job still revolves around investigating detection alerts. So this is basically the outcome of automation. I'll get alerts, and then I'll have to look into them to determine whether they are actually true positives. Sometimes I'll just say TP, or false positives, and I'll just say FP. Yeah. So if you hear this, then you know what they mean. Yeah. So, for example, we can get a very simple ticket saying like, oh, we see reflective load from this process on this host. So what do? We can, I mean, there's many different things we can do. But what I like to do is I will go and grab a dump, like a process memory dump. And then I will carve out the memory region that is kind of like ref loaded into, and then I will throw it into like whatever tool that allows me to actually analyze this carved out memory region. It could be like a .NET binary. It could also be just a normal PE. So The last part of what I do is basically answering a lot of client requests. Yeah. The most common type of request we get is for the analysis of phishing emails, network logs, suspicious files, anomalous activity from like a user or a specific endpoint or machine. And recently, actually, very interestingly, I've been getting like quite a fair bit of this kind of requests where the client goes like, oh, can you help me understand why is this other company's security product raising such and such alert to me? And then I've actually like gone through so many of them. It's kind of like a reflex to just not want to like investigate them and just like give them the template answer. While we don't represent this other company, we have looked into this request and determined that it's a false positive. And maybe you might want to inform this other company to actually fine-tune their alerts so that you get less of these alerts pushed to you. Thank you. Yeah. So it's a bit weird, but the thing is like, as part of our service that we provide, managed detection and response, we aim to please, right? So like, a lot of times we will actually end up actually looking at the alerts generated by other companies' security products, and then we'll just be like, oh, okay, actually that's probably like a false positive from like ML or something, like machine learning analysis. Most of the time that generates a lot of like very generic false positives. Yeah. So now that we know like what I actually do, kind of, so we can go into talking about like what a typical day in my life looks like. So I actually work in this like follow the sun model, and I usually start the day off checking if there's anything that's handed over to me from Europe team. And then typically there will be nothing. Yes. Yeah. So what I do is I open up my computer and I wait for an alert to come up. Yeah. And yeah, in the meantime, I might want to try to find threats. Yeah. Maybe I take a medium severity rule that we already have, and then I look at the data generated for the past maybe 1 week to 1 month, and I look at and see if there's anything that we could possibly have missed, because it's a medium rule. So a rule in itself will not actually trigger an alert. So yeah, I might spend a good amount of time going through like all the data, doing some searches, trying to create visualizations, and try to help myself see the data better. And I might do all that and I might still come out with nothing at all. So then a client request pops up, and then I will go and answer this request. Maybe the client wants me to just look into this endpoint because the user says that, oh, something funny happened to my computer. Oh, I don't know, is it hacked already? Yeah, so that's what I do. I basically go look at like the past maybe 1 week worth of detections or telemetry on this host, and then I will make a decision based on like whatever I'm seeing. If there's no explicit malicious activity, then I'll reply as such. So a lot of times actually it is more often than not false positives, but that doesn't mean that we don't spend time actually looking into each and every single one of them. Yep, and then maybe an alert pop up, I investigate it's a FP. And another alert pops up, I take a look, oh, it's a user downloading a POP. So then I don't think it's anything that's concerning. I just raise it to the client for awareness, and then I will close the ticket. And another client request comes up. Maybe this time around is asking, oh, I have this user who received like this phishing email. Can you do something? Can you help me look at what's going on? And then more often than not, I would say like maybe a good 80% to 90% of these kind of phishing emails are actually just redirecting you to like credential harvesting sites. So like a lot of times we still do our investigation, we still find the domain and the redirectors, but then yeah, it's not very exciting, to be honest. And yeah, while I wait for more alerts to come, I might just want to give you another shot at hunting. So then this time around, I may try like to actually hunt for specific behavior related to maybe raspberry robbing worm. That is something that I've seen come up quite a bit on clients like in the past month or so. So yeah, that might be something that's interesting to me. So I look at what are some of the common behaviors or telemetry that's associated with the raspberry robin, and then I go hunt for them, and maybe I just get lucky and I find like a couple holes. So what I do is I actually will actually just go and dig further, make sure I get all the persistence and everything, and then I will carry out the remediation, and then I will raise it to the client just for their awareness and go like, oh yeah, we saw this, but everything's remediated. You're all good now. Yeah. So yeah, then maybe a bunch more alerts come up, and those are false positives. And another request comes up and still a false positive. So like you can imagine that like my day usually just goes past like this, like spending a lot of time digging through like data just to come up with the conclusion that these are false positives. Yeah. And that basically concludes what it's like to be a threat hunter. Yeah. So actually I was going to end off the talk just like that, because I felt like, yeah, the life of a threat hunter is really not that exciting, right? Most of the time. Most days it's not that exciting. But then like, since I still have so much time left, I guess I have to talk about like an atypical day in a threat hunter's life. So for example, one day I wake up and then I hand over. So at the point of handover, there's nothing, absolutely nothing for me to work on. All of a sudden, this alert pops up, and say, oh, something funny going on this host A, on this client domain A, and it's coming from this user consultant. So then I take a look at the activity. I think it's kind of malicious. It's definitely not benign activity, not legitimate activity. So I quickly call up the client, and then the client actually tells me that, oh, this is expected. We are already expecting it because it's part of a purple team exercise. You don't have to do any remediation, but then just continue and report any new activity that you find. So I go like, okay. And then I continue studying the activity, like do a proper deeper dive, but with the knowledge that this is actually not an actual threat. So this alert, yeah, actually, most of our alerts are actually generated based on like multiple rules, firing, yeah, triggering. So like once it hits a certain threshold, then an alert will be generated, because then the algorithm considers the host to be at risk. So what I do is I look at the rules, because those are like really very good starting points. And the first one here is fowler's execution via MSHTA, which is essentially a living off-the-land binary. So this can be actually exploited to execute directly malicious. Sorry, just give me. To execute directly malicious payload bat.txt from a remote server. So in this case, it's bat block core windows.net. Yeah. So that happened. And we also see rule number 2, which is a cobalt strike beacon on process conhost.exe. And it's it's loading this very suspicious DLL, beacon x64 DLL. Yeah. So with that in mind, now I will go and like try to look for things to kind of complete the picture. So first thing I like to do is I want to look at the process tree. So it's really, these kind of things can be really quite noisy. So sometimes it's like it doesn't take much effort for you to actually find. So I see MSHTA spawn MS build, and then which subsequently spawn conhost. So that explains like how we have like these two separate events because they are actually ultimately linked. And then I take a look at like all the telemetry that I have for conhost, and then maybe I see like network connection logs. So at this point in time, I might not be super sure that these are like the malicious domains, like the C2. But that's fine, because to confirm, I just need to take a dump of conhost. It's still running on the endpoint. I just take a memory dump of it, and then I just run the, because it's the rule fire on cobalt strike beacon, so I just run the cobalt strike beacon parser to extract the beacon config, and true enough, it gives me the same results. So these are actually what our rules look like in pseudo form, because obviously top secret. Rule 1 is fileless execution MSHTA. You can see that basically what it does is it looks for new processors with the name MSHTA, where command line is not NT, and command line is also not the Windows default shell, and command line is also not like the commonly seen legitimate usage of MSHTA, yeah. So it's really quite straightforward. Most of our rules are quite straightforward. And I think here, I just want to bring your attention to the severity is medium. So actually, you see that in this rule, we have quite a bit of whitelisting, if you will. Like all the not contains, not matches, not equal. And yet, like, we are still assigning a medium severity, probably because after, so there's like a bit of fine tuning that has to go on when a rule is made. And then after the rule goes into production, we see that, oh, there's actually still quite some noise. So yeah, it's not a high fidelity rule. And then rule number 2, we have the cobalt strike beacon DLL. So this one actually is I wasn't sure whether I want to talk about it because it's actually leveraging like our own memory scanner. But then essentially what it does is it looks out for these two DLLs, beacon x64. Yeah, so from our experience, like running simulations, cobalt strike and all those, these are quite standard for cobalt strike beacons. And it's I think it's a high fidelity rule. Yeah, it's a high severity rule. And actually, for those of you interested, I also included some Sigma rules that these are like open source generic rules, similar to like the pseudo rules here, but I guess with a little bit more information. Yeah. So those who are interested can actually take a look. So these are the ones that actually I think they attempt to detect the same things. So now I want to like actually do a deep dive into conhost, because this is the one with the beacon. What I see is conhost spawning CMD. So it runs like a couple of net commands to create a new user and add it to the local admin group. And you can see actually something interesting here is the first command probably didn't work because this guy didn't actually adhere to the company's password policy. And then we also see conhost spawning a new process, svchost.exe. So this is not your normal standard svchost.exe. This is the malicious one because it has a very strange parent. And then it also subsequently injects into it. And this svc host actually loads a module called Rubius. So for those of you who are not familiar, it's like a widely used tool to actually interact with and abuse Kerberos. So that will explain why we also see kind of like a flood of network connections towards multiple hosts on their port 389. We also see PowerShell running these two commands. The first is to download the proc dump zip from sysinternal's website. The second is to unzip the archive. So the expand archive should be a PowerShell built-in commandlet. Yeah. And then there's another instance of CMD process launch. This time round is to execute the proc dump that we just unzipped. And then the output is saved to p.dmp. Yeah. So actually, like, in this scenario, there's 3 other rules that we also subsequently detected on this particular host. So they look something like this. We have Cobalt Strike default PowerShell. It's actually like really simple if you look at it. When you see a new process and the command line starts literally with like just this specific command, that is like the pure vanilla Cobalt Strike default built-in PowerShell command usage. And strangely enough, it's actually a very high fidelity rule. There's not much false positives. So we actually just mark it like critical. Yeah. And then we also have LCS process dumped. So yeah, again, this is like a very, very simple rule. When new process is created and the command line matches these simple rejects with lcs.exe inside and like the flags. So yeah, this is actually a high fidelity rule and it works. And the last one is a bit more complicated. It's actually offensive.NET module load. So this is actually a critical rule as well. Basically what we did is we kind of like compiled like a list of like known offensive tools and their module names when they are usually loaded into memory. And yeah, for this you actually have to look at image load. And in this particular case, we are looking at like the .NET runtime events. So to sum up the case so far, yeah, so we are like a managed detection response service, but then at the back of it, it's actually our EDR product. Our solution actually gives us like quite a big advantage because we are able to like cover quite a bit of ground in like a short period of time. And all the data is actually like enriched through our rule engine. So by the time it comes to us, we kind of already know like what exactly to look out for, what is the most critical badness, and then we pivot our investigation from there. Yeah, and there's also like the benefit of like basically not having to worry if like the physical artifact itself is already gone, because ultimately you already have like the historical telemetry to fall back on. And I mean, for example, if there's like a malicious script that the attacker executed and then like it's no longer on the endpoint, we are obviously not able to find out exactly what this script was trying to do, but at least with telemetry, we can know what actually was successfully executed as a result of this malicious script. So yeah, at the bare minimum, we have that. And then, yeah. So moving on, this is now day 2. Yeah. And this time round, we actually get, again, it's an alert, but if you notice, it's now domain B. And it's on another host, DC. It's actually on a DC on another domain. But this domain still belongs to the same client. And it's coming from the same user consultant. So what's going on here is that we have a new rule. So from now on, I won't be explaining our rules anymore because like they are really quite straightforward. And then if you are like really keen to know, you can like ping me separately, yeah. So this rule is basically detection of living off the land binary started with WMI. So in this case, it's MSHTA. And then what does it do? Basically, the same thing. It executes the same thing, the same malicious payload. And therefore, you also expect like the same process chain to spawn. So I'm not gonna elaborate on that. And the interesting thing this time around is we actually see like SVC host, which is a malicious SVC host spawned by con host. It's actually like executing anti-DS util to this. So this command is very specific and it allows the attacker to actually, or in this case, shall I say the consultant to actually dump the entire AD database from this DC. So the thing is, yeah, like I said, I was talking about like how we have EDR on the endpoint. So we have like this constant flow of telemetry coming from like the host. So at the start of each day, we always like to go back to the compromised host, known compromised users, and kind of like pivot from there and start hunting for any fresh activity that might not have triggered an alert. So in this case, we saw new activity. Yep. This time around is like CMD pinging the DC on the other domain, and when the ping successful, they subsequently executed this WMIC process called create command to actually create a new process MSHTA on the DC on domain B. Yeah. So that is our lateral movement. Yeah. So actually, like, the funny thing is, on the same day, this is still day 2, and then we just barely started on the continuation of the purple team exercise. So all of a sudden, like in the middle of the day, when everything's like so calm and peaceful, I thought I've already like updated my purple team activity already. Like everything's so nicely settled. I suddenly get like 13 consecutive alerts on this other domain, still the same client, domain C, but different user. This time around is compromised admin. Yeah. But the thing is like, when I look into some of the initial activity, I see like some similarity, and also like there's the question mark about like, cause it's a purple teaming, so you expect like to see different TTPs anyway. Yeah. So I was like thinking, it's a bit weird, but the activity still generally like aligns. But nonetheless, like with so many alerts coming in, I just like I can only like make a very brief overview of like the new activity, and then I'll just like raise it to the client. But this time around, I didn't call them because it's in the pretext that this is possibly still part of the purple teaming. But they replied me very quickly, and they say, "Oh no, these hosts are not within the scope of the purple team. So can you please investigate all of them thoroughly and like treat this as an actual incident?" So yeah, this is when I want to emphasize like the importance of like timely communication, whether it's like with our clients, internal team, stakeholders. Yeah, it is very important if you really want to like make progress with the investigation, because like you always want to have like the most updated information to work with. And because like in this case, we actually provide like a brief, daily brief of the new findings that we have. So our client was able to like just read that summary and not like have to comb through the entire activity timeline. And therefore our client was able to like get back to us quite quickly that, oh, you know, this is probably a true positive. So yeah, we had to consider this a malicious threat actor, an actual threat actor, and we made a separate like master ticket because there's so many hosts involved. So like it's a bit difficult to track if you don't have a master ticket. So like after I done all that, I decided to like really look into all these like alerts properly. And on all the 13 hosts, we saw like very similar things basically. We saw this in packet used to remote execute like CMD to actually execute a PowerShell script. And this PowerShell script was hosted on different hosts. And subsequently, we actually did like some analysis of, we managed to grab one of the scripts from like one of the endpoints, and then we actually did an analysis of like what it's trying to do, and it's basically a lot of enumeration. And then we also see like another rule where we saw like the service creation. So that is the system log, I think, system log event ID 7045. Yeah, so this service is specifically created like with gibberish service names to launch CMD executing this specific command. And basically what it does is it will do task list, which is like, I don't know, PS on Linux or Unix. Basically it lists the running processes, and then like try to grab LSS, the process ID for LSS. And then when I have that, spawn run DLL. Yeah, to launch this com svcs.dll mini dump function and providing my LSS PID that I just found. And yeah, save my dump to this random temp file that I just randomly named with a random file extension. And I want a full dump. Yeah, basically that's what the command is trying to do. And coincidentally, we also have like another rule that tells us that this was actually blocked by Defender, because like Defender also, Defender as in like Windows Defender, also, yeah, it actually is quite a good AV. So like it actually block this, and this rule is really very simple. What we do is we just track the event ID 1117, and that is part of, that is in the Windows Defender operational logs. Yeah, that should be under application logs. And yeah, so like subsequently we were able to attribute like this very specific CMD command, like character by character, to like this to LSSC, which I think needless to, you don't even need to guess, is for like all sorts of methods to dump LSS. So after the alerts, we decided that okay, we want to kind of like look at like where all this activity is coming from. So we went to look at security log. The first thing we want to see like the logins. We want to see like where exactly is my compromised admin coming from. And true enough, on all 13 hosts, we were able to see like this single source IP. I'm not sure if it's very clear, but yeah, it's a 192.168. Yeah. And we were suspecting, oh, this could be the patient 0, right? Or at least this is the intermediate host used to lateral move into like these all 13 hosts. But the problem with this is, with this particular patient 0 is we have the IP, we kind of know the host name, but we don't have our EDR solution on this endpoint. We have no visibility on like this endpoint's activity. So what we did was like we went to the client and say, hey, we think this is a critical host. Can you like please get our EDR installed? Yeah, and they did it quite quickly. So by the next day, they have it already. And true enough, we have an alert. But this time around, the alert is like really just very minimal. It's for scheduled task, which is like persistence. So like it will always execute. And then it is kind of similar to the previous in packet, but this time around it's actually used to launch this bat.dll from run.dll32. Yeah. And so we actually did like static analysis, and we saw this like C2 152 redacted for confidentiality. And we also like kind of managed to attribute these to probably like a compiled version of Chisel. Chisel is like a tool. It's a fast UDP TCP tunneling tool, and in this case, it's used like a backdoor. And we also see like quite a number of outbound network connections to like multiple other hosts on various ports. So we kind of think that it could be indicative of like a port scanning. And like I said, like we didn't actually have our EDR on this patient 0 prior to this day, right? So we decided that, okay, since our alert was also limited, then we probably want to like really dive into some of the forensic artifacts to get a better understanding of like what exactly happened. So then we pulled the EVTX and we ran this open source tool. Chainsaw is actually developed by Countercept. And yeah, basically it very nicely kind of like sift through all the EVTX and kind of like report you some of the more interesting critical event IDs. And in this case, it was that both system log and security logs were cleared. So no joy. But you know, we were looking around, poking around at some of the like other interesting EVTX. One that I really like look at is PowerShell operational. So that one actually contains like the exact script block, and a lot of times it contains like decoded, deobfuscated script blocks also. So you don't have to like work your ass off trying to like deobfuscate the code itself. So yeah, we saw this on actually this Windows task scheduler operational. It's also, I think it's also part of the application logs. And then it's heavily redacted. But you can see from the time that basically the creation and deletion is like within 1 minute of each other, or even like, within like 30 seconds. And basically there's a whole bunch of these on the day before. Yeah. We know the user that actually created this, but the thing is like we don't know where it's coming from. So another thing that I want to talk about is so I don't know, I think you guys cannot see because it's like so small, but event ID 106 is for task registration, like task creation, and then 141 is for like task deletion. You know, like after working as a blue teamer for like 1 year, right, you kind of like just have all these numbers in your head. And we were able to find some like more interesting stuff from the MFT. So like we saw that the user profile was created actually just a day before. So actually this host is very unlikely to be patient 0. And then it's immediately followed by PowerShell usage. So like you can see the time here is like actually very close. 906 and 90602. Yeah. So this like basically quite indicative that like the compromised admin was already compromised, and then like directly the moment it landed on the endpoint, it started doing like nefarious things. And we also saw, this one is interesting, we saw like Notepad++ actually being created like 20 minutes later. So this actually suggests that the attacker has like desktop access. And yeah, okay, so sidetrack a bit. Then we look at the PowerShell script, right? So like just now I said, we already did some analysis, and like it's basically a whole bunch of enumeration stuff. So this is RDP user, this is browser history. Of course, it's not just Chrome history, it's like all the browsers. And then there's, at the very end, it like enumerates the running processes and the ARP cache and outputs them. So actually this is something that is interesting, because like actually in the MFT we saw this file created together with Notepad, right? So the config.xml is actually like something that's quite interesting. It contains the like brief history of the files that were ever opened. And yeah, we saw, so we opened up the config.xml, and then we saw like, true enough, Notepad++ was indeed used to access, like, you can see the path is actually quite similar to basically, yeah, what happened basically with these two pieces of information, we can piece together that the compromised admin on currently still patient 0, compromised admin on patient 0 execute like all these things to actually launch like remote scheduled tasks, to actually launch like the PowerShell scripts. And then the PowerShell script does enumeration. So like all this enumeration output is output to like specific file names and stored in the patient 0 itself. And because the attacker has desktop access, so he just use Notepad++ to kind of open it up and read. He can just read it directly from the patient 0 host. Yeah. So I guess the takeaway here is that even if like your logs are cleared, there's still like lots of other logs that you can leverage, and you can like really find interesting things from like different artifacts that you might not even think that can relate to each other. Yeah. And a lot of the other artifacts that I never thought about, but I like to, I mean, my team and I like to look at are like, I think these are like the very standard ones that most of you should already know. And yeah, I just want to throw in some OSINT that we did to end off. So like, okay, it's so sad, my screenshots are so tiny. But yeah, this was like the exact command like that we see on like all the remote service created. And then the top is actually the command, from the LSC tool itself, and they match perfectly. And this is just like more confirmation that it's the same command. So that's how we kind of like attribute the dumping of LCS to these two. Yeah. And that's the end of my presentation. Yeah. I just want to put out this disclaimer that even though this is like the last day in my talk, but actually this is just the start of the incident. And there's like still a lot of things that we have not discovered, because like, is this patient 0? It's maybe not, most likely not. Like there's still so many things that we haven't found out yet. Yeah, so the thing, I guess, to wrap up is that there's really no 2 days in a threat hunter's life that's the same. And if you are new to cybersec and if you're like interested, then you can come find me after the talk to find out more about what I do. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the end. Thank you guys.